Well, thank you, Bill. Yes, we are here from Washington today, and it's just for the last couple of days been such a great experience to be part of this conference with all its energy and its ideas. You know, it occurred to me that while I could certainly give you an update on Washington and what's going on across the whole gamut of issues that we're facing there, it would probably be a lot more compelling if I brought a key member of the government with me who could give that to you herself directly. So as I'm sure many of you know, the Federal Trade Commission is the principal government agency with regulatory authority over the advertising business. They're involved in virtually every issue of importance to us, from privacy to children's advertising, and now even to patent trolling, which is a scourge I know for so many of the agencies that are present in the room today. So that's why I'm particularly pleased to tell you that I brought a guest. It's FTC Commissioner Maureen Ohlhausen. She's agreed to join me in a conversation today on all of our key advertising issues. By way of introduction, Commissioner Ohlhausen was appointed by President Obama almost a year ago to a term as commissioner that will expire in 2018. So she's going to be here and she's going to be influencing our business for really quite a period of time ahead. She has served at the FTC previously from 1997 to 2008. Most recently as the Director of Policy Planning, where among other things she led the FTC's Internet Access Task Force. So welcome, Maureen. It's really good to have you here today. I think what we will do just to, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
It really is good to have you here today. That's good.
It's nice to be here.
I think one of the things we'll do, just to sort of set the background for the discussion we're going to have on our issues, I think it would be good if we sort of asked Maureen if she would give a little sense of what the FTC does and what it does particularly vis-a-vis the advertising industry. I come out of the advertising industry. I spent over 30 years in New York, most recently a very long stretch at Saatchi. And when I first went to Washington, one of the first people I found myself sitting next to at a lunch, this was 12 years ago, was a very senior official of the FTC. And I, of course, came from New York, and I had this vague notion that the FTC was the regulatory authority over the advertising industry, but I didn't have a clue what that meant. So in this lunch, sitting next to this very senior FTC executive, I spent the entire time being very careful, very guarded. I was afraid that if I said the sentence the wrong way or if I used the wrong words, I'd end up being thrown into jail. So this clearly was a sort of a bad, naive view of what the FTC does and how it exercises its regulatory authority over the advertising business. So I think the easiest way to maybe start the conversation is, I know as an FTC commissioner, you regulate any number of industries across the US landscape, probably going from hospital supplies to mortuary supplies to a whole gamut of industries. And we just wonder a little bit, could you talk about what your job is vis-a-vis the advertising industry? Now, what is your job as it relates to advertising?
I'd be happy to do that, Dick, and thank you so much to the 4As for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here and to give you a little more information about what the FTC does. I mean, we're primarily a law enforcement agency, and you might be familiar with our work in challenging deceptive and unfair advertising practices, and we certainly do a large amount of that. And that's the backstop also for a lot of the other work that we do. But we also try to work cooperatively and to give guidance to to industries broadly, including the advertising industry. And over the years we've done, you might be familiar with the green guides, you might be familiar with our policy statements on deception, on ad substantiation. And I wanted to announce that today we've actually released an update to our .com disclosures guide. We issued that in 2000 to give advertisers an idea of what kind of disclosures, how they should be made to consumers who are viewing ads on computer screens. Well, 13 years have gone by, enormous changes in that area, and so we just today issued these updated guidelines to focus on two big trends. One is the movement towards advertising being seen on small screens. Look out on the audience how many people are looking at their handset, their smartphone. That's representative consumers broadly. They're seeing lots of advertising on these smaller screens. And how do you make disclosures useful to consumers that way? How are they clear and conspicuous in that kind of format? And the other topic that the newly revised guide addresses is the use of social media for marketing. That's been an enormous change that we've seen, I'm sure, in your industry. I don't have to tell you, you know more than others about the impact that that's had. So we've updated this guidance today. It's out today, and certainly encourage you all to take a look at it at the FTC's website. But that's an example of the kinds of things that we try to do. We try to, you know, I like to say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If we can give you an idea of where we see consumers' interests, where we see problems arising and steps that you can take to forestall those problems, everyone's a lot better off. But as I said, you know, just to circle back, we do enforcement. And one of the benefits to that is certainly to consumers, right? It keeps the market free and clear of deceptive claims, but that's also a benefit to industry and to reputable marketers and advertisers as well. And then another thing that we engage with the advertising industry a lot on is self-regulation. So we're big believers in self-regulation at the FTC, particularly involving topics where the government's ability to reach some of these issues might be constrained because of the limits of the First Amendment. So we try to work cooperatively with the advertising industry to have self-regulation, but effective self-regulation often needs to be backed up by effective enforcement as well. So that's one way that we interact with the advertising agency over the years.
That's great, thank you. I'd like to switch to a specific example using your comments on self-regulation as the jumping off point. I think everyone in this room remembers over the past 5 to 6 years the sort of build up in awareness and urgency that went across the country around the issue of obesity, and particularly childhood obesity. As this worldwide health epidemic was coming on the radar screen of everybody, including ourselves, one of the big issues that came up was what is the role of advertising in advertising certain kinds of products, sodas, salty snacks, things of that type. Is our advertising really contributing to the fact that kids are getting obese, and it's becoming really very much a worldwide health emergency? At that point in time, we began conversations again with the FTC. Because they do believe in self-regulation, they'd prefer that an industry regulate itself instead of the government having to do it through them. And we, working with most of the important food and beverage companies in this country, in point of fact, virtually all of them now, developed a self-regulatory code. This is the code of what is appropriate to advertise to children and what isn't. And that self-regulatory code, which was created under the name of the Children's Food and Beverage Advertising Initiative, was launched about 7 years ago. The FTC has been our sort of partner in that. This is sort of a model of a public-private partnership. And as we have the commissioner here today, I thought it might be interesting just to hear your thoughts on, you're a published author on the subject of obesity, but beyond that, how is that program? How do you see that program? Does it have the teeth you were hoping it would have? And is there any evidence of how it's doing?
Yeah, so I've actually been involved in this issue for a number of years. In my previous iteration at the FTC, as the head of the Office of Policy Planning, I did a lot of work on the advertising and obesity issue. And I think we really need to think about it in two ways. One, there are some people who want to say that advertising has been associated with the increase in obesity. And that's one question. My article sort of question the link there. But I think the other more important issue to look at is, can advertising help address this? Are there things that advertising can do on the positive side to address what is a big social it's a social issue for the U.S., it's a health issue, it's a safety issue. We have problems even with recruiting young people to the military. There's starting to be, you know, fitness problems. So it's really a big issue, and we need to take it seriously. But what we need to do is focus on things that aren't the easy target, the feel-good target, but what's going to be effective. And that's sort of what I like to address. And so looking at the Children's Food and Beverage Advertising Initiative that started a number of years ago, I think that has been a good effort. And one of the things that the FTC can do to help in this debate and to address this issue is we actually have so we're an enforcement agency, but we also have a whole Bureau of Economics. We have about 70 PhD economists on our staff, and they're very good at doing research and correlating data and analyzing data to see what are the trends showing. So recently, just last December, we issued a report. It's called a review of food marketing to children and adolescents, a follow-up report on looking at some previous, in contrast to some previous reports on this area. And one of the things that we did find was that there have been improvements in this area, and we think the Children's Food and Beverage Advertising Initiative has been an important part of that. Now, our report didn't make recommendations. It just looked at the data and said, what has changed? Are there some positive changes? Because that's one of the fine lines I think we need to draw, is that we have to give consumers choices. We have to give them the information they need to make their own decisions. I get concerned, however, when we, as an agency, try to step in and make choices for consumers because we don't like the choices that they're making. So that's one of the fine lines. But one of the other good things about the Children's Food and Beverage Advertising Initiative is it's also using, I think, positive messages as well, not just stop doing this, but also start doing that.
If I could just go back a year or so, about a year and a half ago, at the behest of Congress, four government agencies, including the FTC, put together a task force, again requested by Congress, to look at what foods scientifically, based on calories, fat, sugar, whatever, were appropriate to be advertised to kids, actually as defined as under 18, and what were okay to be advertised to them. So this was the government basically deciding what's good food, what's bad food, and what could it be advertised to people under 18. That project died because it couldn't get funded. The funding of it dried up. But at the end of the day, the preliminary recommendations were so draconian that 88 of the 100 most popular products in this country would not be appropriate for advertising to children under 18. Clearly an over-the-top solution.
I wasn't there at the time.
No, she was not there.
It was before I got confirmed to be.
No, you were absolutely not there then. But in point of fact, I mean, I single that out as an example of how the government, unleashed on an issue like that, can go to a place that really makes no sense. I mean, is really over the top. I know you have done an enormous amount of work on self-regulation, and I just wonder, what's your sense of the proper role of the government in regulating things like that, if at all, or is it best for the government to work as you do in a public-private partnership to get a self-regulatory solution? What is the proper role of government in legislating or regulating to that extent, to the extent that is done?
So one of the things, and I've touched on this already, we do have this dual role. And certainly if you have advertisements that are false or that are deceptive, it is appropriate for us to challenge them. So if you have an advertisement that is claiming, oh, this is a great low-calorie food, and it's not a low-calorie food, it's really appropriate for us to challenge that, and it's better for the market, right? Because if you have a product that's trying to advertise, and it is a low-calorie food or a healthier food, you want to be able for that product to make those claims and not have everyone be skeptical of them because there's been so much deception in the marketplace. And that is one of the issues involving weight loss. We constantly see sort of sketchy claims about weight loss products, and we've challenged them over and over again. So that is an important role for us. But on the positive side, I think that having self-regulation, having an organization that is looking at advertising as part of the industry, that's more flexible, that can have requirements on industry that we as the government couldn't have on them because it wouldn't withstand First Amendment scrutiny, or we couldn't get it through Congress. But we can be an adjunct in two ways. One, by if you have a company that says we're going to adhere to this and then they don't, then we can bring some enforcement back up in that case. And then two, having our research function play a role, because we do have these economists. They've done some wonderful studies over the years, one involving the benefits of advertising of fiber. This goes way back. I don't know if you remember this.
Sure.
One of the things that the FTC did was a study of advertising of high-fiber cereals and the benefits that had to reach a number of population groups that weren't getting the government message. And these people actually changed their diets and increased the amount of fiber that they consumed. And one of the benefits of having an agency like the FTC do that is our results can be taken, I think, a little more seriously, because we say, well, you know, we care about consumers. We'll bring challenges where there's a problem, but also we're going to point out when we see something that's good for consumers, you know, what our research shows. So our research can be sort of taken up into the debate with a little more weight, I think.
Excellent. Let's switch, if we could, from children and obesity to privacy, which is an issue that probably affects everybody in this room. Again, by way of history, about 4 years ago, the Federal Trade Commission, recognizing the advances that were being made technologically in the collection of data and the management of data to really perfect the targeting of advertising online based on interests, based on behavior, the Federal Trade Commission issued a challenge, really, to the advertising industry and said we need a self-regulatory responsible code of conduct on how that data should be responsibly used. They wanted to have be sure that it was transparent to the public when that data was being collected. They wanted the public to understand why that data was being collected, and importantly, they wanted the public to have the choice to be able to opt out of the collection of data for targeting purposes if possible. And the FTC at that point issued a challenge, said, can you do almost directly what you just did in food and obesity with privacy now? Put together an equally robust, muscular self-regulatory program on data collection and data use for marketing purposes. And from that, as the Commissioner well knows, the Digital Advertising Alliance was created, of which the 4As was a founding member of the group that brought the Digital Advertising Alliance together. And today, now, about 3 years later, it is this incredibly robust program. The little icons which appear on online ads run about 1 trillion times a month. That's how often we see them. People do click through them. When people click through them, they're told that data is being collected, why it's being collected, and they're giving the opt-out mechanism. We've got very good reaction back and forth from the FTC and the industry on that program. And you know, you are reasonably new, and I'm just wondering, with fresh eyes, how does that look to you? How does that program look to you?
Well, I definitely applaud the advertising industry's efforts in creating the Digital Advertising Alliance to implement a behavioral opt-out, behavioral advertising opt-out program for consumers. And also, I understand you're working to limit some of the secondary uses of data. So you get beyond, you know, simply like blocking everything, right, or allowing everything. You know, and I know the system isn't perfect, but I think you've made enormous strides, and I really hope that consumers will, you know, use this and feel comforted that they have this option available to them. And this is the kind of self-regulatory response I like to see. And also, I think, to harken back to having the enforcement backup as part of the effective self-regulation. You know, we certainly have lots of conversations with the DAA about, you know, the work that you're doing, the enforcement, the investigations, and then ultimately, you know, if necessary, referring to the FTC for further enforcement.
Good. One of the, what we've talked about so far are really issues that fall broadly under the consumer protection portfolio of the Federal Trade Commission. But there's another side of the Federal Trade Commission as well, which is an antitrust side, the side that looks at anti-competitive activity. The action that's being brought right now on the Nielsen-Arbitron merger is part of that piece of the FTC. And the reason I bring it up is this. As I think you know, with the DAA now really up and muscular and with a lot of teeth, at the same time we continue to have in the press and through consumer activists and sometimes even the government, this notion that there should be a sort of fail-safe automatic do-not-track mechanism that is just put on a browser, hit the button once, and all data is no longer tracked. That, of course, would completely defeat the purpose of the DAA, which was there to make it a more thoughtful choice for the consumer to know what they were doing if they opted out. And, of course, some of the browsers have now entered into a competition to try to build in their own do-not-track mechanism as a simple one-step process. Microsoft has a version. Mozilla last week came out with a cookie blocker, which would basically stop the collection of all data. We're getting to a point now where we have this incredibly robust self-regulatory program subscribed to by the entire ecosystem, including, by the way, Microsoft and Mozilla. But now the browsers seem to be going off on an independent track. And I will raise this gingerly, I guess, but there are 4 browsers that probably control up to 80% of the browser market. At what point does it start becoming noticeable to the government if browsers with that concentration of a market start making unilateral moves that automatically could block the collection of data, which would of course hurt this room, hurt all these business people, but beyond that would really take away the economic underpinning which advertising is for the free content on the internet. Is it conceivable at some point that that could catch the notice of a regulatory agency?
Well, you bring up a lot of important points there involving the FTC's dual mission. So we are a consumer protection agency, but we're also a competition agency. And I think it's vital that we approach all issues, including the advertising issue and the privacy issues, looking through both lenses, wearing both hats, that we understand that where the lines are drawn can have important implications for competition, and that our concern should ultimately be that consumers are better off. And so, you know, one of the things that I have always been interested in is the value of advertising for consumers. So truthful, non-deceptive advertising can really bring a lot of benefits to consumers. And I don't want the debate on privacy, I don't think we should lose sight of that. Because there's 2 things. Consumers certainly get a lot of information about new product offers. You know, what's got a different quality, a lower price, you know, greater convenience. You know, all the attributes across which products compete. Consumers often find out about that through advertising, and we shouldn't discount the importance of advertising. And then also, that's how companies compete, is through advertising. And so one of my concerns is setting up a regime where you say, well, the people who have the data, or if you're a big conglomerate and you can share data freely within it, you know, we have to pay attention to, well, what kinds of incentives is that creating in the market? Is that creating an incentive towards consolidation because of the free data sharing within a single organization? Now, I'm raising all these issues. I'm not answering.
No,
I'm not answering them, but those are the kinds of things that I think is really important for us to look at as an organization that should care about both sides, competition and consumer protection.
Yeah, I raised the issue really to make a sort of a point that while a lot of what we've talked about so far is consumer protection, in an instance like that where hypothetically, if the browsers did all get into an automatic canceling of the ability to collect data from consumers, and if there are only 4 browsers, it's a hypothetical example of there could be an antitrust overlay to this issue of privacy as well. So I just wanted to make the contrast between consumer protection and potential antitrust. That said, one of the issues that really is of great importance to us as a group, and I think everybody in this room may have had some experience with it, is this phenomenon of patent trolling, which I know you actually know quite a bit about. To those who don't deal with patent trolling, there are entities, of course, that are out there now buying patents, buying them solely with the purpose of challenging hundreds of companies for violations of those patents in the hopes of getting a settlement from those companies, not going to court, just getting a settlement. And it's, you know, the President of the United States recently was quoted as describing it as extortion. So, I mean, it's gotten to that level of visibility. I make the point here only to recognize the fact that the FTC now is in this issue, has actually been for a while. And while we all sort of think of the FTC in its policing mentality or in its guidance mentality or in its enforcement mentality, there are moments when an industry like ours has a problem, and this is a very serious problem for our members, we can actually go to the FTC as an ally for assistance and for help. And I just wonder, I mean, you really do know a bit about patent trolling. What's your sense of where we are on that issue right now and what needs to be sorted out to see whether the FTC could play a positive role in that to the benefit of this group and all business?
So it is an issue that we have been paying a lot of attention to. We had a workshop on this, and we're having folks take a close look at it. I try to call them patent assertion entities as a more neutral term than trolls, but we certainly have seen a large uptick in activity in this area and in enforcement. And so we've been looking at what kinds of suits are being brought against whom, who's bringing the suits and against whom, and to get a better idea of what's really going on here. And is it an antitrust issue, or is it an issue with the patent system itself, and what's the best way to address that? And one of the things that we did in this regard is recently filed joint comments to the FTC and the Department of Justice with the Patent and Trademark Office, suggesting that one of the basic steps that they could take is to have the real party and interest be much clearer, much more clearly disclosed in connection with patents. So it is something we're thinking about. There might be an array of approaches that would make this better. But it's important to draw the lines in the right place. I think there are a lot of problems in this area, right, but also a certain small number of these patents are being asserted by small inventors. And so we want to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, they're all bad, because some of those might be valid patents, and it sometimes can be hard for the little guy to assert a patent against a big entity. Right. But on the other hand, if there is a problem with these kind of sham suits, repetitive petitioning for claims that lack merit, that's something we would want to try to address.
Well, I guess we're about to close now, but what I would like to just go on the record as saying is that when I first came to Washington, I made that observation that I thought of the FTC as sort of the policeman, and if I said the sentence the wrong way, I'd go to jail. I've since learned that what we really do with the FTC, we have this incredibly productive private-public partnership. The self-regulatory system over 40 years has been great, but I really want to close by thanking you and the FTC for getting into the patent troll issue. It's been very hard in Washington to find somebody who will look at it with a cold eye and try to come to the truth of it. So we really thank you for doing that and for getting involved.
Thank you for having me.
Great.